In this video, we're going to create three elements: electrical pipes, brackets that will hold those pipes in place, and a weatherhead, which goes at the very top of the electrical pipes. This is where the electrical wire from the street connects to the building, and how the building gets its electricity. So let's get started. We will begin with the electrical pipes by creating a cylinder. Let's move the cylinder into position, and we'll set radius to 3, subdivision axes to 12. Now let's position it so it's not intersecting with the wall. We're going to leave a bit of space between this pipe and the wall. Let's move the bottom vertices down, snapped to the grid and the ground plane. And then we're going to move the top set of vertices up to establish the pipe height. Just move it somewhere about halfway up the building. Then we're going to select the inner edges and set them to a soft edge. This will produce smooth rounded shape. Let's check by disabling wireframe unshaded, and this looks good. We're going to duplicate this pipe, rotate it 90 degrees, and move it up. What we want to do is block in the pipe network of how these pipes are going to flow up the building. We're going to create the 90-degree connectors later. Right now we just want to quickly block in for how these pipes are going to be positioned. Let's duplicate the pipe again, move it over, and modify the top vertices, moving them all the way up to extend past the border of the roof. And then we're going to duplicate the pipe one more time and position it right next to it. Then modify the vertices, moving them all the way down, snapping them to the ground plane. Now let's take a look. And I like the flow and the position of these pipes. Now before we continue, we need to modify the pivot point for each of these pipes. So it's at the center vertex. And we need to do this for all of these pipes. To mention again, to modify the pivot point, hold D and then C to snap to an edge and then drag it down to a vertex, or hold V to snap to a vertex. We also want to snap each of these pipes, add the new pivot point to the grid. I'm going to double check that we are using 10 grid spacing units, and we are, and then snap each of these pipes to the grid. This will make it a lot easier for us to duplicate the 90-degree connector pieces and the brackets. And by doing this now, we are eliminating a lot of problems down the road where pieces may not be lining up or overlapping with geometry. So ensuring that we are on the grid will save us a lot of time and frustration. Now let's create the 90-degree connector pieces. We're going to select these two pipes and press Ctrl D to duplicate. The duplicated pipes will be positioned on top of the existing pipes, and the duplicated pipes are still selected. Then press Ctrl 1 to isolate select the duplicated pipes. Now we need to combine them so they're one single object. Hold Shift, right click hold, choose Combine. And now we can bridge and create the connector pieces by selecting these inner faces, then hold down Shift, right click hold, and choose Bridge Faces. Change curve type to blend and divisions to 4. This creates the 90-degree pipe. And then we need to set all these new edges to a soft edge. So now we have this 90-degree connector piece. And we need to delete the straight pipes that we duplicated earlier. So I'm going to select these faces, leave the 90-degree curved piece, and delete. So all we are left with is this piece here. Press Ctrl 1 to bring everything back, and we'll have this 90-degree connector piece placed and aligned exactly between the two straight pipes. Now we need to modify the pivot point. So let's zoom in until we are inside the object. And since we kept all of our cylinder caps, we still have the center vertex from the straight pipe, which we will use to snap the pivot point to. So hold D, then C, and middle mouse click and drag to snap along an edge all the way down to a vertex. So the reason we went through these steps by duplicating the pipes and then creating the connector piece and then deleting everything is because I wanted the 90-degree connector to be a separate object. We still have some work to do with the pipes that we'll come back to in a couple of videos, and especially when we need to UV these pipes. So I find it easier to keep these pipes as separate pieces, and then in the end we will combine everything into a single object, so all is one single mesh. Now we're going to take this 90-degree piece, duplicate it, move it over and rotate it -180 degrees. And because we modified the pivot points for the straight pipes and then snapped them to the grid at 10 grid units, and then modified the pivot point of this connector piece, everything will snap and align very nicely. So I can't stress enough how important it is to spend some time to align your geometry to the grid and controlling your pivot points. This will save you a lot of headaches and frustration. Now we're going to select all the straight pipes and press Ctrl 1 to isolate select. Then delete the cylinder caps, the faces on the end of each cylinder. We needed to keep them in order to align the 90-degree curved piece, but now we don't need them. Although for now, we will keep the caps at the very top. Next up is creating the pipe brackets. This will be extra detailed geometry that will show that these pipes are being held in place by these brackets. We're going to duplicate the straight pipe and use it as a starting point to create the bracket. I'm going to select it, press Ctrl D to duplicate. This will keep the duplicated object selected, and then press Ctrl 1 to isolate select. Then we need to insert one edge loop for the width of this bracket. So I'm going to insert one at the very top. Now select these top faces, press Ctrl E to extrude, and set thickness to 0.5. We can now delete all these faces on the bottom. So all we are left with is the starting point, this thick ring of the bracket. Then select these 6 faces in the back closer to the wall. I'm going to hold down Shift and extrude them a little bit. This will be the extra geometry to complete the bracket. And since we left a bit of space between the wall and the pipe, we can use that space for this bracket. Switch over to Edge Component Mode and select each edge of the extruded geometry and snap it to the grid, aligning to the building's wall. I'm going to change the grid spacing to 1 and then grab these outer edges and snap them 1 grid unit away from the wall. You could just grab these edges and pull them away, but I've gotten to such a habit of making sure that everything stays on the grid when I'm working with architectural geometry, and I think that is why most of everything we create flows a lot better, because we do stay on the grid majority of the time. So once we got those edges away from the wall, add 1 grid space. I'm gonna select these inner faces and extrude them out. Then align each edge so the side face is straight. This creates the outer brackets that keep the pipe attached to the wall. And let's adjust the length of the outer brackets just a bit by selecting the vertices and scaling them out. And this looks pretty good. I'm going to disable wireframe unshaded, and we need to set these 2 edges to a soft edge. Now let's select all of the pipes and the bracket, delete history, and freeze transformations. Before duplicating these brackets in different places around the pipe, we would want to UV one and then duplicate the UV version everywhere else. So this bracket would share the same UV space, but we're not going to UV these here. So we will duplicate the brackets temporarily, just to define this space where these brackets are going to be positioned. And then during the UV phase, we will UV one and then replace all of the brackets. So let's select the bracket, Ctrl D to duplicate, rotate 90 degrees on Z, and then hold X to snap on the grid and position it into place. So we're going to have 2 brackets at this 90 degree angle and 2 brackets at this 90 degree angle. And then 2 more going up the pipe. One around here and the other one near the top. Let's grab these two brackets and duplicate them for the pipe next to it. I'm going to hold X and move them to the right, snapping them to the grid. Now our pipe and the brackets are not aligned because the pipe is not snapped to the grid. So let's go to top view and make sure to snap the pipe on the grid only on X axis, because I notice that this pipe is not exactly on the grid. There's a tiny little space on Z axis, and I'm not going to fix it now. This would mean I would have to fix all the other pipes and brackets. So it's not a big deal. I just have to make sure that I snap this pipe on the X axis, snapping it to the right and aligning it to the brackets, which works perfectly. And here we are. This is looking pretty good. We have one more piece of geometry to create, and that is the weatherhead. This detail goes at the very top of the electrical pipes, and it's where the wire from the street connects to the building, providing electricity. So we're going to create a sphere. Then let's go to the top, hold down V, and middle mouse click and drag to snap that sphere to the center vertex of this cylinder. This is why we kept this geometry at the top of the cylinder. Let's set radius to 7, subdivision axis to 16, and subdivision height to 10. Then let's soften the edges on this entire mesh. We're going to rotate 90 degrees on Z so the sphere poles are on the sides. Then we're going to slightly scale this on X, squeezing it on each side, making it more narrow. Then switch over to face component mode and delete the bottom half. We also want to delete part of the front, and all we'll be left with is this shape, which is the shape of our weatherhead. So what we essentially did is using a simple geometric shape, the sphere, modifying it a bit to get the shape of our object we need to start with. I'm going to scale this a bit more from the sides and from the front, trying to get the right proportion. Now switch over to edge component mode, double click on the border edge. This will select all the edges around, and then press Ctrl E to extrude. Set thickness to 0.5, and with the edges still selected, press Ctrl E to extrude again and set thickness to -1. This creates our weatherhead border. And this is looking good. Let's go to front view and move this up. And then also move it forward. We want the bottom edges to slightly overlap the pipe below. Then we're going to scale it from the side a bit more. And the last thing to do is create the faces on the front and on the bottom using append to polygon. So select the object, hold shift, right click hold, choose append to polygon, and then left click on one edge to start, and then left click on the second edge to create the face. Then press G to repeat append to polygon to continue creating faces for the rest of the edges. We're going to disable wireframe unshaded, and we have one edge we need to change to a soft edge, this one in the back. So let's select it, change it to a soft edge. Also, let's change the front and the bottom edges to a soft edge as well, but not the one on the bottom corner, just the front and the bottom edges. Then I'm going to scale this weatherhead a bit more and duplicate it for the second pipe next to it. Also, just like for the brackets, we do want to UV this weatherhead first before duplicating it over, because they will share the same texture, but we will do that in the UV phase. So now we are done with the electrical pipes, the brackets, and the weatherhead.